In the basement of the British Ministry of Magic, on a dusty shelf in a hall the size of a cathedral, there's a glass ball with a yellowed tag under it. 4 lines of writing, and the last line has Harry Potter's name on it with a question mark in front of it. Not a smudge or a typo, a piece of punctuation the wizarding government's own filing system put there, in writing, and never took it off. And that punctuation is the reason the war happened. Harry Potter was never the chosen one. He was the chosen target, and the question mark on that label is the Ministry of Magic admitting, in their own handwriting, that they figured out his name by reading a crime scene, not the future. One ground rule before we start: when the books and the films disagree, the books win. Everything in this video is from the page, and the page is what the Ministry's own archive is written on. Now, we're not arguing today about whether the prophecy was self-fulfilling. Dumbledore does that for us in Book 6, and the fandom's been quoting him for 20 years. We're doing something different. We're going to look at the physical object the whole prophecy plot revolves around: the orb, the tag, the shelf, and the lock, and ask the question nobody asks. Who labeled it? When? And what does the punctuation on that label tell us about the wizarding world's relationship with destiny? There's a guy with a quill in the basement of the Ministry, and his guesses run the world. In the Order of the Phoenix film, the prophecy orb is a glowing snow globe Harry pulls off a shelf, has a quick conversation with, and Lucius drops in a fight scene. The camera lingers on his face. It does not linger on the label. Blink and you miss it. The book is the opposite. The book makes you stand there and read the tag. SPT to APWBD, Dark Lord, and question mark Harry Potter. That's 4 pieces of information. The structure is the whole story. Line 1, SPT to APWBD, who made the prophecy and who heard it. Sybil Patricia Trelawney speaking, and Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore listening. Initials like a filing reference at a law firm. Clean, professional, and timestamped to 1980. Line 2 says Dark Lord, one of the 2 subjects of the prophecy. No name, no question mark, just the title. The Keeper is dead certain about this one. There's exactly 1 Dark Lord on the books in 1980. Line 3, you have the word and it's doing real work. It tells you the prophecy has 2 subjects, a pair, a matchup, 2 names that should have the same level of confidence behind them. But then there's the rest of line 3, question mark Harry Potter. Compare it to line 2, Dark Lord, no punctuation or hedge, and then at line 3, question mark Harry Potter, a qualifier. The Ministry is guessing. The keeper of this archive was confident enough about half of this prophecy to write a title with no asterisk. On the other half, the half about a 1-year-old boy from Godric's Hollow, he reached for a piece of punctuation that means I'm not sure. That's the tell. The filing system itself is telling you in writing that it doesn't know if it has the right kid. I genuinely don't know, and the books don't tell us whether that question mark was scratched onto the tag in 1980 when the prophecy was first recorded and there was no name to attach, or in 1981 after Godric's Hollow when the keepers wrote Harry Potter but refused to commit. The book is silent on the timing of the punctuation, but that doesn't matter to our conclusion. Whichever year somebody picked up that quill, the question mark is still on the tag in 1996 when Harry walks down row 97 and picks up the orb. 15 years of Boy Who Lived headlines and the file is still hedged. So why put it there? And why didn't anyone ever take it off? And yes, I do know about the lock on the orb, the mystical security system that supposedly proves these labels mean something cosmic. We're getting to it. It doesn't save the prophecy, it actually buries it deeper. The book tells us exactly when Harry's name, not the question mark, got onto the label. Listen to Dumbledore in Order of the Phoenix. The official record was relabeled after Voldemort's attack on you as a child. It seemed plain to the Keeper of the Hall of Prophecy that Voldemort could only have tried to kill you because he knew you to be the one whom Sybil was referring to. Notice what Dumbledore tells us and what he doesn't. He tells us when the name went on. He doesn't tell us when the question mark went on. The Keeper either wrote them together in 1981 or the question mark was already sitting there from 1980, waiting for a name to hedge. The book doesn't say, but either way, once the name was on, the hedge stayed with it. The label changed after Godric's Hollow. The Keeper of the Hall of Prophecy heard the news, learned Voldemort had attacked the Potters, and updated his filing to match. He didn't consult the heavens, he didn't run a spell, he reasoned backwards from a murder. The most famous wizard alive got his title from a clerk reading the news. The label doesn't cause Harry to be the chosen one. The label is downstream extreme of Voldemort's choice. Voldemort picks the Potter house, Voldemort attacks, he dies, and then somewhere in the basement, a clerk picks up his quill and writes Harry Potter on a tag that's been sitting blank or near blank on a shelf for over a year. And he hedged. He had a name, he had Voldemort's own behavior to back it up. The most powerful dark wizard in living memory had just walked into a nursery and attacked a specific baby. By any normal evidentiary standard, the keeper had his answer. But he reached for parenthesis and a question mark instead. Think about that. The one person in the entire wizarding world whose job is custody of these orbs looked at the strongest piece of evidence and still refused to commit. The question mark stayed. The wizarding world, the government, the press, the Death Eaters, and Voldemort himself spent 16 years acting like Harry Potter is the kid the prophecy named. The whole cultural machinery treats him as the chosen one with absolute certainty. Order of the Phoenix is literally titled around the conviction that Harry has a destiny. But the people in charge of the actual records don't agree. The public story is destiny, but the paperwork is doubt. And the paperwork is what's actually true. Dumbledore knows it. When Harry asks him in the same chapter why his name ended up on the prophecy and not Neville Longbottom's, Dumbledore doesn't reach for fate or for the keeper, he reaches for the murderer. He chose you, not Neville. He gave you the scar that has proved both blessing and curse. Voldemort, the one who walked into the nursery, that's who decided that Harry was the chosen one. The prophecy didn't. The keeper didn't. The universe didn't. A man with a wand pointed at a crib, and everyone else, the ministry, the order, the press, and the fandom, has been writing it up as destiny ever since. And stay with that word for a second. Chose. Because Voldemort didn't just pick Harry. He unpicked somebody else. There was another baby on that list. The prophecy fits Neville Longbottom as cleanly as it fits Harry. Same week of birth, parents who defied Voldemort 3 times, same paperwork, same shelf and keeper. Voldemort had 2 doors in front of him in the autumn of 1981. He picked the Potter's door. He walked past the Longbottoms. Think about what that means for the people on the other side of the coin. Alice and Frank Longbottom didn't get to die. They got Bellatrix Lestrange with a wand and all the time in the world because the Death Eaters needed to know where Voldemort had gone. They got tortured into a hospital ward in St. Mungo's that their son visits for the rest of his life. Neville grows up watching his mother hand him empty Drubel's papers because she doesn't remember she'd already given him one. That's what the other side of the Keeper's question mark looks like. The prophecy didn't choose between 2 families, Voldemort did. And then a clerk in a basement heard the news, picked up a quill, and wrote down the name of the baby who survived. Not because the universe pointed at him, but because the killer had. But the Longbottoms got the version of the story where the question mark fell on their door instead. That would be the end of it, except for the one piece of evidence that almost sinks the whole theory: the lock. So here's the objection. If the labels are just bureaucratic guesses, why is the Hall of Prophecy protected by lethal magic? Broderick Bode tried to retrieve an orb that wasn't his and lost his mind for it. Sturgis Podmore got arrested trying the same thing. The orbs are clearly dangerous mystical objects, so the labels must mean something cosmic because the security system is reacting to them, right? Okay, Lucius Malfoy is the one character in the scene who's done his homework. He's been studying this room for over a year on Voldemort's orders, and he explains the rule in one sentence. Only the people who are permitted to retrieve a prophecy from the Department of Mysteries, Potter, are those about whom it was made, as the Dark Lord discovered when he attempted to use others to steal it for him. That's not Lucius theorizing, it's confirmation. Voldemort already tried, he sent proxies. The lock kept him out. That's why Bode broke. That's why Podmore got picked up. The orb defended itself. But pay attention to what it defended itself against. Not destiny, but identity. The lock doesn't care whether you're the true subject of a prophecy in some cosmic sense, capital D destined sense. The lock cares whose name is on the tag. It's a fingerprint scanner, and the fingerprint it's checking against is whatever name the keeper wrote on the label in the basement. So basically, the most dangerous security enchantment in the wizarding government's most secret department is keyed to a clerk's best guess. If the keeper had written the wrong name on the tag in 1981, the lock would defend the wrong name. The orb doesn't know who Voldemort meant, it only knows what's on the label. Voldemort, with the Elder Wand on the horizon, the Resurrection Stone in his future, an army of Death Eaters at his command, cannot pick up his own prophecy. And here's why. His name isn't on the tag. The keeper wrote Dark Lord, a title. a job description. Tom Riddle could stand directly in front of his own orb and the lock wouldn't recognize him, because the lock isn't reading the wizarding world's common knowledge, it's reading 4 lines of ink in a basement. Everyone in Britain knows who the Dark Lord is, but the filing cabinet doesn't, so he has to do it the hard way. Run a year-long Department of Mysteries operation, put Bode under the Imperious Curse, break Podmore, and when all of that fails, he has to trick a 16-year-old, whose name is on the tag, into walking into the building and carrying the orb out for him. He's not fighting destiny or some cosmic force, he's literally fighting a filing cabinet. And Harry, the kid the Ministry hedged about on the tag, can pick the orb up. The lock recognizes him as the subject. That's the lock obeying a label a bureaucrat wrote in pen after a murder, the same label that, 15 years later, still has a question mark on it. The hall isn't haunted, it's just hard to shoplift from. And once you see that, once you accept that the lock is just a name check on a clerk's handwriting, a much bigger question opens up. Because that orb isn't the only one on the shelf. There are thousands of them. When Harry walks into the Hall of Prophecy, he doesn't see one shelf. He sees a cathedral, towering shelves stretching into the dark, lit by candles, packed with glass orbs from floor to ceiling. The book gives you the scale on purpose. There are thousands of these things. Thousands of prophecies, each one supposedly a glimpse of the future. Each one supposedly weighty enough to lock behind lethal magic. And each one supposedly important enough to file. If prophecies were actually binding, if every glass ball in that hall was a piece of fate the universe was contractually obligated to deliver, those shelves would be the most important archive in human history. There would be unspeakables full-time, cross-referencing them with current events, a public office reading them out, a national emergency every time one came true, and a national party every time one didn't. Instead, the shelves are thick with dust. The orbs glow dully, the labels yellow, the aisles are silent. Nobody comes down here. You can read the dust in 2 ways. Maybe the room is just big and old. That's fair, except this is a world where dishes wash themselves at the burrow and brooms sweep the floors at the leaky cauldron. A first-year charm keeps Molly Weasley's kitchen spotless. The Ministry of Magic, the same ministry that funds the Department of Mysteries, could put a single enchanted duster on a shelf down here and the cathedral would clean itself in an afternoon. But nobody has, for decades or maybe longer. The dust in the Hall of Prophecy isn't a staffing problem, it's a priority problem. The most magical government in Britain has decided this room isn't worth a household charm. And in Book 6, Dumbledore gives us the line that settles why. Do you think every prophecy in the Hall of Prophecy has been fulfilled? He's been down there, he knows what's on the shelves. He's telling Harry point blank that the answer is obviously no. Most of those orbs are dusty for a reason. Most of those orbs were guesses made by half-asleep seers in pubs that nobody ever acted on. The room is full of glass balls the universe ignored. Somewhere one of those shelves there's an orb that could have had Neville's name on it. Same dust, same silence. This is the Department of Mysteries, the same place with rooms devoted to death, time, and love. They're not worshipping these prophecies, they're collecting them like specimens. It's a lab, not a shrine, which brings us back to the tag. If the room is a lab full of mostly wrong specimens, then the labels on the specimens are scientist notes. A keeper behind a desk writes down whose voice spoke, whose ear heard, and his best guess at what it was about, then files it on a shelf where it'll probably sit untouched until the building falls down. That's the actual job. Most of these specimens never matter. Most of these tags never existed. The keeper is filling them out a way a coroner fills out a tag in the morgue, with a system and abbreviations, and when the evidence is ambiguous, with a question mark. The question mark on Harry Potter's tag isn't really a riddle for fans to decode. It's a standard professional notation of a wizard civil servant who knows most of the shelves are wrong, who knows he's reasoning backwards from a crime scene, and who knows the honest answer to "is this really the boy?" is the same as the honest answer to almost every orb in this building. So, we've basically proven that the most famous prophecy in modern fiction was a clerk's guess defended by a name-check lock, and that the Chosen One title was a label and not a destiny. So, what does that do to the rest of the books? It guts the cosmology, for one. The wizarding world the book spends 7 volumes building is one where fate writes destiny on a glass ball in basements. Strip the question mark off Harry's tag and the whole machinery collapses into something much smaller and much more honest. Prophecy isn't a feature of the universe in this story, it's a feature of the government. There's a department for it, there's a guy with a quill, there's a filing system, and the filing system by its own admission doesn't know if it has the right kid. That dramatically changes who the hero of the books actually is, not the boy the universe pointed at. There is no universe doing any pointing. The boy a clerk wrote down. which means everything Harry does for 7 books, he does as a kid who was told he was special by a paper trail and chose to act like it was true anyway. He's not chosen, he's self-chosen. The wand arm at Godric's Hollow was Voldemort's. The name on the tag was a bureaucrat's. The decision to walk into the forest in Book 7 was Harry's. That's the only one that was ever actually his, and it's the only one that mattered. It also reshuffles the Longbottoms. Neville isn't the what-if version of Harry, he's the kid the question mark could just as easily have fallen on. His parents are in St. Mungo's because Bellatrix needed information after Voldemort vanished. Bellatrix, who was loyal to a master who picked his target by reading a baby. Neville's whole arc, the killing of a snake in Book 7 and the quiet heroism, that's not the consolation prize for losing the prophecy lottery. It's evidence that the prophecy never picked anyone. Both of them were always going to be the kid who could have done it. One of them got a quill mark while the other one had to earn it without one. And it does something almost worse to the rest of the Wizarding World's institutions. The Ministry of Magic, the same ministry that runs the Department of Mysteries, built a war and a propaganda machine and a generation of trauma on top of a label its own keeper hedged. Nobody went down to the basement to check. Nobody ever erased the question mark. The most powerful government in magical Britain spent 15 years acting on a document it could have audited in an afternoon, and just didn't. That's the Wizarding World Rowling actually wrote. Not one where destiny is real, but one where destiny is useful and nobody asks. If you go back and reread the books with this lens, Dumbledore's whole pedagogy looks different. He's not training a chosen one, he's training a kid who was labeled one, and he knows the label is a hedge. He literally tells Harry so in Book 5 and 6, and he trains him anyway, because at some point the question of whether the tag was right stopped mattering. Voldemort believed it, so Harry had to be ready for it. The prophecy became real not because the universe enforced it, but because both sides agreed to act like it was. That isn't destiny, it's a self-fulfilling civil service document. And that's the implication that bleeds out into everything built on top of these books. Every spin-off and prequel, every Cursed Child sequel inherits the same shelf in the same basement. Every Chosen One arc anyone tells in this universe from now on is standing on a tag a clerk hedged. The mythology the franchise rests on a piece of punctuation nobody erased. Somewhere in that basement, the question mark is still there. Nobody has ever gone down to fix it. And thank you so much for watching. Drop a comment, agree, disagree, or report me to the Ministry of Magic for unauthorized inspection of a Department of Mysteries record. And YouTube thinks you'll really like this theory, so go check it out.